Okay, this is part 2 of the network layer architecture that you need to understand to help pass the CCNA, Cisco CCNA, and this is network fundamentals too. I mean, even if you're not planning on being certified in any kind of network certification, this is kind of stuff that just like foundational stuff you need to know. Um, so where we left off is we were trying to make sense of this chart, and we've got two models here, OSI model and TCP/IP model. The OSI model is listed in 7 layers. TCP/IP model has 4 layers that we usually don't identify by number. We identify those by name. So you've got the network access, the internet transport, and application layer. And then the OSI model, it's typical to say layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, but then we have the names here for them also. We talked about the protocol data units that are at each layer. We talked about some of the protocols that function at each layer, and there's many more protocols than just listed here. These are just some of the basics here. And they're not all protocols. Like when I put media and medium here, that's not a protocol, right? I just stuck it in there because it's nice to know that at layer 1 we're talking about, if they say media or medium, they're talking about layer 1, they're talking about the wire, radio waves, cables, hubs, but this is not a protocol per se. Okay, so let's talk about the network devices that happen in each layer, and this is really helpful in answering lots of questions and doing well on network tests. If we're talking about the cables, right, or we're talking about the wires, whatever they are, or fiber optic cables or radio waves, we're talking about layer 1, the physical layer. All right. Also, a hub, which you don't see hubs around too much anymore, they also function at layer 1. The reason that hubs function at layer 1 is you can plug your devices into them, but the hubs are not smart. They don't know about who plugs into them. They don't know about MAC addresses or IP addresses or anything, so they're not very smart, and they're just retiming and regenerating signals oftentimes, and so they function at layer 1. Also, a NIC. If you have a network interface card, where your cable plugs into the NIC is a layer 1 function of a NIC. You can see here the NIC functions also at layer 2. At layer 2, the NIC functions because the NIC has burned in MAC address in the NIC. So it's a layer 2 issue right there. The fact that you have a NIC with a MAC address, that makes it layer 2. All right, network devices, switches. Switches are very popular. You have a switch in any network that's probably over 5, 6 computers, you'll have a switch. The switch is able to record MAC addresses in a MAC address table. So a switch knows about MAC addresses, and a switch is responsible for delivering the data to the final destination, to the NIC, to the computer, by way of the MAC address. So you need to have a MAC address to have a final delivery of a package of packets to your computer, and switch knows about MAC addresses. Switch does not know about IP addresses. IP addresses are the role of the router. The router knows about IP addresses. It can take apart the router when it's received, will take apart and strip off the header, the packet header, to get to the IP address and to the subnet mask. And from the IP address and the subnet mask, the router is able to figure out what network you are on. That's the role of the router. The role of the router is to find the best path and then switch the packet to the interface for that network. So path determination, if you see that word on the test, path determination or best path, well, a path, another word for a path is a route. You can say I'm taking this route or I'm taking this path. Well, if you talked about routes, if you're talking about IP addresses, right, you're talking about packets, you're talking about layer 3, the network layer, or in the TCP/IP model, the internet layer. Okay? Routers are only concerned with IP addresses. Routers do not concern themselves with MAC addresses. All right? Okay, and then here at layer 4, I've put here layer 4 switches. There is such a thing as a layer 4 switch, which is basically a switch and a router put together. So it can do, it has ports for switching, and it also has router capabilities, interfaces for routing data out of different networks. So I've put their layer 4 switch. Also, we have devices called firewalls, and firewalls are routers that have capabilities of A firewall is a router that can read layer 4 data and also can read data that's happening at higher levels all the way up to layer 7. So a firewall can filter packets based on viruses, based on certain other things that happen at higher levels, right? So a firewall could go all the way up, I guess, to layer 7. All right, and we'll move over here. And keywords by layer. If you see network applications, services, programs, peer-to-peer applications, you know you're talking about the application layer. If we're talking about reliable, connection-oriented, end-to-end delivery, flow control, those are all keywords that in this case are dealing with the transport layer. So it's important to keep that in mind as you're taking a test or you're working. Network layer. If you hear the word logical addressing, if you hear the word logical addressing, excuse me, that just jumped. If you hear the word logical address or logical addressing, then you know you're dealing with the network layer and IP addresses. If you hear IP, you know you're talking about the network layer. Okay, so that anything to deal with IP addresses or logical addresses, you're talking about the network layer. If the word best path appears in the question, you know that you're talking about routers, right? Path determination. You know you're talking about routers, and you're talking about layer 3, the network layer. Okay. Data link layer. If you see the word physical address, you know you're talking about the data link layer. If you see media access or network access, or the word network access control, or media access control, which is MAC for short, you know you're talking about the data link layer, right? This is the layer of frames, right? If you hear the word frame, you know you're talking about the data link layer. Now, if you're talking about the physical layer, the bottom layer, the physical layer, the word bits, media, medium, that all identifies the physical layer. Let's take a look at this graph, and we'll talk about this graph in the next movie.